You're listening to the Embrace Family Recovery Podcast, a place for real conversations with people who love someone with the disease of addiction. Now here is your host, Margaret Swift Thompson.
Welcome back. On today's episode of Embrace Family Recovery Podcast, I continue my conversation with Tom Farley. In this second episode with Tom, we continue to discuss self-acceptance and the benefits of being yourself and how recovery has helped him find that. He also discusses the pandemic, and the key to navigating that for himself was through connection. Tom shares openly how his baby brother Chris has influenced his own recovery. Let's get back to Tom.
The Embrace Family Recovery Podcast.
I mean, the tragedy, obviously, as we know, those of us on the periphery, that you lost Chris, and you've mentioned it already today, that he passed. Does those moments that you saw, the authentic, maybe less troubled, hurting Chris, linger for you? You know what I mean? Because you've lost him, and that's just obviously the worst case scenario for anyone in this family illness. We don't want that outcome.
But I got to see that.
Yeah.
That's the gift. It was brief. But to be honest, now when I'm out speaking to groups and talking about my journey, when I go to my meetings and I work my recovery program, he's there. He's part of my recovery. He's part of my story. I get to talk about me now. He is absolutely, as you say, right there with me. And it's not like before where he was taking up space and attention. He's just now part of it. He's my support.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for us.
I love that.
And boy, does that feel great.
I bet. He's a fabric of your recovery. He's part of that fabric.
Yeah. People see Chris as this, celebrity. I got him in a completely different way. And it's, in a very personal way. And
sacred.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, it's funny, even that, I do have so many talks to people. I meet so many families that have lost somebody, and I'm in the treatment field now, working for Rosecrance. I felt after COVID, I needed to get people into treatment. It was kind of the last piece of my journey, was to stop just advocating, but actually getting people out, which I love. But I go to a lot of awareness. I do public forums on the current epidemic and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if sometimes I talk about it, but a lot of times I just kind of feel it. It's like, I feel very blessed in that I don't talk about Chris's death and his overdose and his disease so much. I talk about it in terms of, gosh, we all loved this guy. And that's what we're losing people. We're losing people to this disease. And it's not the disease, it's not the drugs. And I know there's a lot of hate and all this effort to we got to do that too. But I prefer to kind of dwell more on the human level of the loss. Look at the loss, and everyone has value, but to define people on how they died and that addictive person that is gone, that addictive person is gone. But you know what? With them, that addictive person took this amazing person.
You bet. With
them.
And that happens long before someone dies.
Yeah, and it takes a family with them sometimes.
Correct. And to the point of kind of how we started, your mother led the charge to change the trajectory of the impact of the disease taking you all hostage. Though all of you have had your journey of getting to recovery, finding your path, losing the journey because the disease took people, that is the hope of the story. The hope of the story is we don't have to go down that way, but we have to work hard to change the trajectory we're on.
Yeah.
And though Chris couldn't stay here on earth with you, what I hear is he helped you find your way into your long-term recovery, which is now giving back life and recovery to others through the work you're doing. What a lineage, started by your mom going to AA.
Yep. Yeah, literally.
Gives me chills.
And again, it's amazing to me how this disease is just like, it's so big and tentacles and all that kind of stuff. And yet I connect to so many different aspects. It's so much more than me and my recovery. It's my family, it's my kids, it's my sibling. And I'm learning that's kind of the neat thing about recovery is I'm learning all the time. You know, some people say something amazing about, I don't know, some family function they just left. I'm like, okay, I was mad about that, something that happened 20 years ago at some function, and I haven't let that go. I'm like, I need to hear these things so I can add so much to. I've spent so many years burying a lot of those traumas, and they bubble up and they come out, and you're like, what's this? Why am I angry about this? It's not this that you're angry about, but all the stuff that just kind of bubbles up. And so piecing through that, the ability to go back and like address some of these long-term kind of things that have festered has, you know, it's wonderful.
So I think for the listeners who are families and people with the illness, I want to just take that apart a little bit. What age did you engage in recovery where you've had sustainable recovery? How old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, geez, it was probably 55.
Okay. So for 55 years, let's give you a little grace through those early years and also through the times you're trying to get sober. You maybe spent 45 of those years using one emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
To cope with everything that probably went down in a family filled with the disease on different levels. Trauma, loss, resentment.
Well, we did develop another secondary emotion in the fact that when somebody in my family fell and hurt themselves and we were being funny because we didn't like their pain, and yet after all this laughter and every stuff, and they're still in pain because they fell and hurt themselves, then we would get, because that's not the reaction we wanted, we would get frustrated, if not angry. And we would ping pong between these two emotions, these dominant emotions, without developing any sort of anything in between.
And the alcohol either enhanced that or buffered that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so you get sober, you stop using the buffer, you stop being numbed with that. And then all these other feelings start coming up that you don't even know how to name, possibly how to express other than using the old ways.
I'll give you one of my favorite examples.
Yeah, I'd love to.
The first time I was in recovery and somebody said, well, you should have a gratitude journal, just get a piece of paper and write gratitude and start listing things down. And I'd be like, okay, I can do that. And I got my paper, wrote gratitude along the top. And then in the next 45 minutes, I'm staring at this blank paper going, nothing? You're not grateful for anything. Like, you can't come up with a single thing. And it's not that I wasn't grateful. I didn't understand gratitude, but I was always focusing on these big things. Like, I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for that I live in this wonderful town. But I was missing every single day these little things. I didn't understand gratitude and its relationship to my every second minute of the day. And I still struggle with that, but recovery is part of I look for it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's the stupidest, dumbest little thing. But boy, am I grateful for that. And the effect has been dramatic.
Yeah. You and I share a similarity. I think it was about my second sponsor, maybe. She's like, you need to start a gratitude journal. I'm like, please, I was not fun to sponsor. I am not fun to sponsor. And so I was like, please. She's like, 5 things each day. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I can't come up with 5 gratitudes. I was definitely a glass half empty kind of gal. So I can relate in the journey. And I think that blows me away today, I don't see myself as half empty. I have my days, but I am way more full than I ever thought. And the change that's brought that, abstinence, recovery community, and taking those humble suggestions that are given to me and actually following through to see what the benefit can be.
Yeah.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you.
As we enter the new year, I'm offering something new. I'm offering a sibling group. In my time in working in the field of addiction, I am struck by families being given less support than they deserve as a whole. I'm aware that children have now got some resources, parents have resources, partners have resources. And the one relationship that I keep hearing people say, I need more, is the siblings of someone with the disease of addiction. So I am thrilled to be offering exactly that. I will be offering a sibling coaching group. It's an 8-week series. I'd ask you to enroll for the whole 8 weeks. You can come with your own siblings or on your own. And it is a journey into the basics of understanding the impact of the disease, some education, some coaching, and definitely a lot of connecting with other siblings impacted by this disease. Please find more information in my show notes below. And consider this as a gift to your adult children if you are a parent who know that there has been impacts on the siblings of the one in your life who has the disease. And or if you are out there as an adult sibling and would like more resources and education, this is a great place to start.
You're listening to the Embrace Family Recovery Podcast. Can you relate to what you're hearing? Never miss a show by hitting the subscribe button. Now back to the show.
When you move forward through this journey of your recovery first, I want to touch on that sibling part, and then now as a partner and a father, because it's a different journey per se. Did you feel as a sibling that your job was also to keep the burden light for your parents because they had so much on their plate? Like, do you think that's part of why you were so responsible? Did you have that awareness of like, my gosh, they're dealing with all that. I can't tell them. Maybe I had a tough breakup or a school struggle. Like, were you able to go to your parents, or did you feel their bandwidth was just too full with what?
It was just, yeah. And the thing is, I kind of think my dad really loved the fact that he had these 5 kids, and he would whip us into a frenzy, and he would just sit back and it's like, I created all this. And just this craziness. He loved it. My mom just hated it. But, my dad loved it. But that's it. Again, we just kind of kept it to that surface level stuff. I used to love, because my dad was just so intelligent and smart. He gave me my love of books that I just haven't, ever to this day, and a big reader. And we only yet still had a few kind of really deep conversations. I miss that. But no, I think we were all more, we thought our parents were just so amazing, and they provided us with just such a wonderful life that we were pleasers. We just wanted to please people. We didn't want to disappoint. So why would we come to my dad with some problem? We didn't want him to see that we're failing. Like our family dynamic, we had every dinner together. And my dad would sit at the head of the table, and he would go like, okay, around the room, like news, tell us what you did today. And we would like, Dad, I did this. And he just wanted to hear what our day was. And we were like, we wanted to tell him like this greatest thing. And when we saw that pleased him, we were just over the moon. And
interesting.
Yeah. So that was the dynamic, is just pleasing Dad, because he gave us this just such, wonderful things.
Such a great feeling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting because I just heard an interview with the author of Dopamine Nation. Have you read that yet?
I haven't. No.
I'll be fully transparent. I haven't either. But listening to this interview, man, I want to dive into it because I'm fascinated. I loved her approach and the way she taught and spoke about it. Talks about our dopamine hits come from different places, obviously. Yep. And for those of us who are pleasers, that's our dopamine hit. So it's interesting that the dopamine hit was maybe started in that arena in the family, not because anybody did anything wrong. It was just the nature of the dynamic. And then it sounds like for your story, that kind of carried out into the universe. Like, I want to be seen as successful. I want to be a pleaser. It sounds like it carried out to Chris too, because I would assume, I'm not a comedian, nor do I ever want to be, that the best feeling would be my work makes someone happy.
Yeah.
So in recovery, is it finding for you a way to balance that? Because you're not drinking. Awesome.
Yeah.
You're in recovery, but is the
Right.
pleaser part still that dopamine hit that you work on? Like, are you aware of that for yourself?
I was early on. I noticed this when and people have noticed this too.
Isn't that great when others notice
Yeah,
it
oh my
instead of
gosh.
us?
But I would be in the circle sharing, and my initial shares were all based in that, like getting people to like me in a meeting.
Yeah.
And now I go just the opposite way. Whatever the topic is, I really internalize, reflected. I try, and I don't talk about like how, like, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I don't care about that. And that's your problem. I really, how is your problem? Like, how does that affect me? And how have I dealt with that in the past? And I talk about really personal, like what it means to me. I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm trying to be as honest and authentic as I can be.
And that's the thing that I had so turned around in my own journey. Because really what you just described, when you hear something and you say, I don't care about you, it's up to you, that's actually not true. What you're sharing is feedback of how it impacted you to have the same thing and what you've done to assist yourself. So in turn, you're giving them wonderful A, acknowledgement they're not alone, and B, that this is how I've coped and this has helped me, and they can take it or leave it. But it's actually the most respectful and beautiful way to experience connection with one another.
Well, and let me rephrase that. Like, because I live in Wisconsin, and it's kind of one of the things that we do, and maybe it's a Midwestern thing as well, but it's definitely here, is everyone says, oh, everyone's so nice.
Oh, yeah.
In Wisconsin. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's this deep. And in fact, I kind of expect you to be nice to me, but the real work is below that. And it's not that I don't care. It's like, I don't care about that surface level, like false empathy. It's the real, true caring and empathy. It's way deeper. And I try to go there every time. I try to get out of that surface level kind of, that's easy.
The BS.
Yeah. The real work is deeper.
I agree. And it's a hard thing to change if you're a pleaser.
Absolutely. But I know I need to go there. I can't help if no one else wants to go there, but it's like, that's where I go every time.
So I'm curious, this is actually more for me than maybe my listeners, but if they value it, great. I find that really tricky to flip from that type of connection in a meeting that does happen to then going to some sort of social event and play the game versus what we do in those meetings. Do you find that a struggle at times too?
Yeah, but the thing is, what was interesting, I've noticed that, and I've talked about this, is like, I'm a very social person. I work a room. That's another kind of family trait that I learned. But now, I used to work around, it wasn't authentic. And so I would be this extremely social, outgoing, everyone, I had all the crowd around me.
Yeah.
Looking back, I don't think I've ever felt more isolated in my life.
Right.
In those moments. But to everyone else's view, it's like, oh my gosh, she's got all this connection. I'm like, I'm not connecting with anyone. I'm entertaining or whatever it is. Now I go through and I don't need to talk to everybody, but the people I talk to, I'm just my authentic self. And I walk away like feeling much better and connected to maybe a few people than having no connection to a lot of people.
Great observation and awareness. And I love that and value that. And I will take that with me personally and remember that when I'm next in these rooms going, oh, and do the connection on the real level. Because at the end of the day, if I don't do that, I'm selling out my soul. I'm not being filled with integrity. And I'll probably walk away depleted because I think what you're saying is true. You show up authentic and people won't want to be. Don't take it personal. That's on them. But be yourself. Right?
It's funny. I go into schools and I tell that specifically to adolescents and teens and young adults is like, you don't have to please everyone. Your barometer isn't how many friends do I have or how many people do I connect with. Your barometer is like, how was my ensemble? How was the people around me make me feel? Do I feel trusted and accepted? And if I don't have that feeling, and it's a feeling that I learned in recovery, these aren't my best friends in the world, the people I want to hang out with the world. But boy, do I feel trusted and accepted when I walk into a meeting. So now when I go out into a big party room and I don't feel that, I just tell myself, you have two choices. You can leave or you can stay and just not give people more than they deserve.
Yeah. Conserve your energy.
Yeah, because I love it. Yeah. It's not your ensemble. You don't owe
Right.
them anything, but
Right.
be nice, whatever.
Right. Well, it comes back to what you saw in Chris, that you wanted the message you think he wanted you to know, which was to be authentic. You don't have
Yeah.
to be anybody else. So one of the things I do appreciate about this is your journey of recovery has been, as you said, 50s. So it was like in a slow journey. Like you watched others around who were worse. You got periods of sobriety without recovery, and then you turned yourself full into recovery and have gained value in that more than you ever dreamed, right? Like they say in the big book,
Yeah.
beyond our wildest dreams. So what was your catalyst? Do you have a moment where you went, I surrender, I am going to embrace recovery fully, I'm diving in?
Honestly, I think I call it one of the blessings of COVID is I was probably a year into recovery when COVID hit. And I just saw the rest of the world just struggle with connection and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, God, I don't feel so bad. And I realized it's because I could I could go to a meeting and I could connect with an important connection any time of the day, any place in the world, whenever I wanted to. I got through COVID beautifully because I never lost that connection, at least, even if it was just a small piece of, I'm just talking about this one little aspect of this commonality that we share. But it got me, like, I never struggled through COVID because I was totally connected.
What's interesting, Tom, is I remember when COVID started, and I wish to God I could find the clip. It was someone on the news, and again, I don't know what network, I don't know anything, but they said, if we want to survive COVID, we need to take a page out of 12-step recovery because that is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Wow.
I was like, what?
Wow.
We have not ever heard mainstream media talk about us as the example, even though I have heard from thousands of family members coming through an education program going, my God, why don't we teach this in high school?
Yeah.
This way of living is so wonderful.
Yeah.
But I remember that. I was like, oh, so that's really speaks to me and came back to me right now because of your share, because the reality is that's what got you through. You were embracing a program that works for connection.
Yeah. And I never want to lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll never forget how wonderful that felt.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with such a vivid, watching the rest of the world getting fights in Walmart and getting thrown off airplanes.
Right. Right.
It's so far removed from where I'm at. So,
yeah. I think that you hear a lot of discussion in the world of this disease and in families asking, how do I get my person to reach bottom? How do I know when they're going to actually do the work? Where do you stand on that for your own journey, through watching Chris's journey?
Some people will never hit rock bottom. Chris was never, he was successful enough. Even, I don't know how do you define rock bottom?
Right.
For me, the rock bottom is, I think and the real focus should be is how isolated do you want to be, or how isolated do you think this person needs to be, or do they have room to be more isolated? I mean, that's really the essence of it in this lack of connection. It's like, it's not about the drugs people are taking or the alcohol or this. It's like, we are, as I said, I love to say, as humans, hardwired for connection. Mm-hmm. We exist for no other reason. And the reason why we deal with our emotions in such unhealthy and unsafe ways and turn to some of these drugs is because it just feels horrible to be isolated and feel alone. And so that's why I ask people, like, in terms of isolation, do you want to go much worse? I mean, is this as far as you want to go? Because it can start to get better.
Yeah. So let's look at that from the family lens, because obviously that's always what I want to try to do. I believe in the parallel process, and I believe isolation is absolutely a major part of the family side of the journey. And I think the same is true. I don't think that I was willing to change until I was to a point where I saw the pain and suffering. I was conscious enough to see the pain and suffering in the eyes of my children and my partner, right? Then it was like, holy crap, how much further do I want to go down this hole and hurt the people I love most in the world? What am I willing to do different? As a family member, I think the same is true. I think family members will hold the same line of isolate, secrets, control, whatever, until they feel, I just can't do this more. It's like, I'm tired. I'm hurting. I want different. And that's when I think family members reach out and find their journey too.
Right.
Sounds like that's exactly what your mom did, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, she started to. I take a page from my brothers. And this is when I started going, I'm like, how am I going to talk to people? What am I going to talk about? And this whole notion of connection. I looked at all my brothers who went through Second City in Chicago and learned this art of improv, this improvisation, which is creating these ensembles. It's not like we were horrible stand-up comedians to stand up there alone and tell jokes. My brothers were really, and Chris particularly, was a master at connecting on the ensemble, or, taking everyone's strengths and weaknesses. And that's when I studied it and I'm like, well, what are you trying to achieve on stage here with this ensemble? And universally it was building trust and building acceptance. And then actually when I got out of the prevention, going out of schools and got into actual recovery groups, I would go to these teen group sessions. I go to the clinicians, what are you trying to do here? It's like, oh, we're trying to build trust and acceptance. I'm like, if I got the thing for you, I'm like, how are you doing that without this kind of like teaching them in a really fun way? But to build this ensemble, but so many families struggle with that. They want to be this one thing. This is who we are. For us, it was like, this is the Farleys. And yet there was all these different pieces. And we were just not an ensemble. And then I became a parent and I talked about ensemble all the time. Then I would walk in the door and it would all go out the door. It's hard. It's hard work.
It is.
To build that ensemble where everyone has a different voice and a different style and everyone matters in their own way. And so how do you put those pieces together? And because it's so hard and to allow people to kind of be themselves, we default to, this is who we are. This is what we're going to show the public. And we're just going to bear up and bury everything else. And this is it. And that's why you see families struggle, because they haven't built that trust and acceptance and ensembleness.
I think there's also the piece, I'm curious of your opinion on this, but there's also the piece that many families are running in base survival mode.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when we're in base survival mode, acceptance and trust seem like a luxury.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And recovery, again, gift to recovery, brings those things back.
Yeah.
So in your family of marriage and children, you've mentioned your recovery is having a transformative and restorative approach. Can you talk about any differences you've noticed in your engagement of that ensemble now that you're in recovery?
Well, two things, a couple of stories.
Yeah.
One of the stories I'd love to talk about is in the middle of COVID, like 2020, there was kind of a break, restaurants started opening up and then we thought, oh, it's over. It wasn't, apparently. So my oldest daughter came back to Wisconsin. She's in New York. And she came back to visit. And we went out to lunch. And we went to this outdoor cafe. And this guy met us at the door and said, like, okay, well, we don't have menus. You order everything on the phone. And we don't have wait staff. So, somebody, you'll order it and somebody will bring your food out. And that's it. And I'm like, I got all kind of like, well, I got a question. Like if I'm on my phone ordering and my daughter's on her phone ordering her meal, but I want to pay for both, how does that work? Then he got really nice. We were like, well, if you really need a paper menu, it's like, that's not what I've asked you. And I got really kind of frustrated and I caught myself and I said, all right, you know what? We'll figure it out. We got it. And I was really overly nice to him. And I turned back and I looked at my daughter and I said, I apologize. I want to be present here with you. And I just, let's just move on. And she kind of paused and she looked at me and she's like, Dad, when we were growing up, you would have those moments all the time. And we just knew to stay away from you the rest of the day. There's some little thing that happened, you would carry it the rest of the day and we'd all pay for it. And I was like, no way. That's not true at all. It was totally true.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, so to see you catch yourself like that was amazing. I saw that. But then to turn to me and apologize,
Oh,
You never did that. And what I was seeing in just trying to working my recovery, my authentic self, and being control things I can control, not only did this relationship that I hold the dearest, my oldest daughter, saw it. I was like, this is what a relationship being repaired looks like. Yeah. I was like, wow. I was just trying to be myself, and people were coming back. Like, and the thing is, it wasn't probably the relationship that I wanted, envisioned, thought that I would have, but it's the relationship that I have. It's a relationship that it's a result of my work, just doing what I can do. That's the relationship I got. That's what makes it just that much more special and authentic. Yeah. That's the real thing. And that was amazing. I've also had a couple of podcasts where people talk about what is recovery versus long-term recovery. I'm like, I don't know. I said, I don't know if there's a difference, but I can describe my journey in this way in terms of my ex-wife. I say, when we first got divorced 10 years ago, 12, I don't know what, I don't do math.
Me neither. You're in good company.
Yeah. So, and people ask me, why'd you get divorced? My answer was, my wife didn't respect me and support me, and when we got divorced. And those were some tough years because I believed that. And then I got into recovery, and people would ask me, why'd you get divorced? And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be honest, I didn't support and respect my wife either. And then a few years after that, people ask me, why'd you get divorced? I'm like, oh, if I'm going to be honest, I wasn't very respectful of my wife and didn't support her. And that's that. Her piece has nothing to do with me. It's all about me and my responsibility to my actions, and being truthful about that and really believing that. Now, my relationship with my ex-wife, it's fantastic. It's wonderful because I'm not threatened, or it's just so much better. Yeah. Is it the relationship that I envisioned when we got married? No, but it is what it is, and it's authentic. And my kids, oh my gosh, they appreciate it so much, and they see it, and they just
restorative.
Yeah, those are the two things I reflect on.
Those are beautiful things.
So much in my recovery. And if I can build on those two things, and I'm sure I am with other relationships, I guess that's why I feel the way I do in my recovery.
Well, the other thing that's evident is that in your recovery, the disease isn't in between you and the people you love.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
And it isn't manipulating you constantly and trying to manipulate them at the same time.
It's funny you said that, because again, when I got into recovery, I started to, in those early shares that I mentioned, not only was I trying to please, but I was also using my story to kind of control and manipulate how people like me and think me. I was using my story in that same way. And again, I just kept going to meetings, and I got myself through that period. I learned. But even early in recovery, I was using my shares and my story as a kind of controlling, kind of attention getting, all that stuff.
Yeah. We don't change overnight, do we?
No, but boy, that seems so long ago. It hasn't been that long, but it just seems like I'm in such a different place.
That's awesome.
That feels wonderful.
I bet.
Yeah.
I want to use a little of that Farley humor too in this podcast, because I do think it's something quite beautiful. That yes, it's tragic to think that was one of the few emotions, but it's also one of the gifts you gave the world, your family. Members of your family have given many people such joy and laughter. It was wonderful today to hear how Tom shares his own recovery journey and discusses the different things that have helped him find his connection with others and himself. Join me again next week as I conclude my conversation with Tom, and he shares some wonderful stories about his brother, Chris.
I want to thank my guest for their courage and vulnerability in sharing parts of their story. Please find resources on my website, embracefamilyrecovery.com. This is Margaret Swift Thompson. Until next time. Please take care of you